Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. This week we're going to be talking about Crawlspace air quality, and we'd like to thank Podyssey for featuring us on their app. It's Podyssey. It's a podcast app where you can subscribe and listen to podcasts, and then you can follow other podcast listeners and see how they're rating the podcasts they listen to. Then based on your interests and the people you follow, they'll recommend new podcasts that they think you will like. You can download their app. It's called Podyssey Podcasts. Podyssey is Podyssey. This week we had an interview with Easy Breathe about their Crawlspace ventilation systems.
Exciting.
Log cabins go back thousands of years. Marcus Polio, a Roman architect, wrote 10 books on building design around 20 BC. He has some of the earliest plans found for log cabin-style buildings. It shows how to construct a building with overlapping horizontal logs and then filling the gaps between the logs with mud and wood chips. In the 1600s, European settlers brought the log cabin design to North America, and a popular foundation style was using large stones under the floor joists, and that would keep the wood from settling into the soil and help prevent the wood from rotting, and it created a crawl space.
Huh. I was wondering when you were going to tie that in.
If you have a home with a crawl space, the floor can be concrete, stone, sand, or dirt. If you don't have a concrete floor, that sand, dirt, or stone could be covered with a plastic sheeting, and you can have a crawl space under the entire length of your home, or there could be a crawl space under just part of your home.
Mm-hmm.
Crawl space foundations are popular in areas with high moisture, in coastal areas. Some types of clay won't support a slab foundation, so a crawl space is going to be better. Crawl spaces are good for areas with sloped land, and they're going to be more resistant to earthquakes. They're easy to service ductwork and plumbing, and they're less expensive than a basement or a slab foundation. Originally, full crawl spaces were vented or open to allow movement of air, and the reasoning was the airflow would allow any moisture in the soil to escape. But the problem, especially in warm, humid climates, is the cool soil and limited air movement in your crawl space creates a very humid environment under your home and under your flooring. There's a study done by Advanced Energy, and they found that crawl spaces with open vents average around 70% relative humidity, and the condensation and water vapor settles on ductwork, wood beams, subfloors, insulation, and other surfaces, which can cause damage and grow mold. The National Association of Home Builders says wood subfloors and wood flooring that are above a vented or an open crawl space are going to be more susceptible to an accumulation of moisture, and this can lead to mold, mildew, and decay. In a humid climate, during the cooling season, moisture moves from the warm, humid crawl space to the cooler, drier air in the living space, and it can trap moisture in the subfloor, which can cause damage over time. Mold spores naturally move through the air inside and outside your home, and the number of spores are going to vary depending on the season. The spores usually aren't a problem unless they land on damp surfaces, and that's where they can start growing. The EPA recommends keeping humidity levels below 60% in areas like a crawl space, and that's going to reduce mold growth. The recommendation for living spaces inside your home is between 30 and 50%. And that's also the recommendation for flooring, wood furniture, cabinets, countertops, wood trim, other products.
We've talked about it a lot.
Right. So you want to maintain that 30 to 50% to prevent cracking, swelling, or damage to wood and other products. A hygrometer is a handy gauge to have, especially if you're a new homeowner. You can get a feel for the humidity levels in your home, and then you can adjust your humidity with humidifiers or dehumidifiers. High levels of mold in your crawl space can increase the mold spores in your home and cause allergy-like symptoms, like a stuffy or runny nose, a cough, irritated eyes and throat. Loyola University says certain molds can be harmful to infants, and in some adults, exposure to mold can make them more susceptible to asthma and a chronic cough. If you have a crawl space with high humidity levels, you can have a musty smell that works its way into your home. And if the floor of your crawl space is dirt, the organic matter in the soil can release vapors that can cause odors. The EPA says dust mites thrive in a humid environment, and a crawl space can be a breeding ground. They need humidity levels above 50% to live.
Didn't we do a whole episode on this?
Yeah, it was a pretty good episode.
Ugh.
The American Lung Association says dust mites are one of the major indoor triggers for people with allergies and asthma, and chronic ongoing exposure to dust mites can dramatically impact your health.
Mm-hmm.
If you have vents that are open to the outside, insects and animals can get into the space below your home, and when an animal dies in that space, it can cause an odor that can get up into your home.
Wow, I don't want a crawl space.
Another concern with crawl spaces is the level of radon gas.
Yeah.
Georgia State University says radon is an invisible, odorless gas that's a byproduct of the natural breakdown of uranium in the soil. Radon levels are going to be the highest in the lowest level of your home, in a basement or a crawl space. Newer homes with a tighter building envelope can have higher levels in living spaces.
Mm-hmm.
The American Lung Association says radon-related lung cancer is responsible for an estimated 21,000 deaths a year in the U.S.,
Wow.
and radon is the number one cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. Because radon comes from rock and soil, it can be found anywhere, and the gas enters your home through cracks and gaps in the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
The American Lung Association says every home should be tested for radon. I spoke to AirThings. It's AIRTHINGS. They have a radon detector called WAVE. It's WAVE. This will continuously monitor the radon level in your home.
Mm-hmm.
It does short-term and long-term readings. It kind of looks like a smoke detector. If you wave your hand in front of it, you'll get different colored lights depending on your radon level.
Space age.
And then you can download an app to your phone to get the detailed levels. And I like a system like this because radon levels fluctuate throughout the year, and
Right.
depending on the conditions outside. So if you do a one-time short-term test, you could kind of get a false sense of security if you get a low reading, and then it could be higher the rest of the year. They also have another detector called the Wave Mini. This has sensors for mold risk, airborne chemicals, temperature, and humidity. So this would be good to analyze the air in your crawl space.
Right.
They also have a hub so you can connect multiple devices of theirs together. Another top-rated continuous radon monitor is Safety Siren. It's SAFETY, capital SIREN. First Alert has a top-rated mail-in radon detector, and Kansas State University has a top-rated mail-in detector.
Cool.
Odors and gases can get into your home through gaps around electrical, plumbing, ductwork, through flooring and walls. In cool weather, when you're heating your home, the stack effect can have a big impact on your indoor air quality.
Mm-hmm.
As warm air rises and escapes through cracks and gaps, it's drawing air in from your crawl space. Some of the studies I read say anywhere from 40 to 60% of the air in your home is being drawn from your crawl space.
Oh, wow.
So you're getting that moisture, mold spores, odors, dust mites, radon, and other chemicals into your home.
Gross.
To improve the air quality in your crawl space and the living space inside your home, many organizations are recommending closing off vents in crawl spaces, encapsulating floors that are dirt, stone, or sand, and that's going to create a dry, clean space. Then install a continuously running exhaust fan. The International Association of Certified Home Inspectors says vented crawl spaces have been constructed with little regard to the moisture-causing sources that can contribute to long-term structural damage or health hazards. They're saying new research shows that conventionally vented crawl spaces converted to an unvented, conditioned space tends to operate similar to a home with a basement. It'll add a lot of benefits to the homeowner, including energy savings, increased comfort, moisture control, long-term durability, and healthier air quality.
What type of crawl space do you have?
I have a split-level home, and it has a basement level that has a cement floor, and it's conditioned. Then there's a crawl space underneath the kitchen and the dining room. And I was having a problem. There were a couple cracks in the foundation wall, so I was having a little problem with moisture. So I graded the soil away from that side of the house. I used hydraulic cement to put into the cracks, so it stopped the leak, but I was still having a problem with high humidity levels because I have a hygrometer. So I put a dehumidifier in the crawl space area, and it goes into my sump pit, and it continuously runs. I think I set it around 45% humidity, and it completely changed the feel in there. It used to be really musty smelling. I used to have carpets down there. The previous owner had put carpets so it's easier to crawl in that space, and it had absorbed moisture over the years, man. It was nasty. So I pulled all of them out. I put a dehumidifier in there, and it is night and day.
Did you say if it was vented or not?
It's unvented.
Okay.
Research by Advanced Energy found an encapsulated, insulated crawl space can reduce heating and cooling up to 18% in some climates. It's going to create warmer floors in winter and minimize damage to flooring. The North Carolina Building Performance Association said closing up a crawl space, which includes sealing the vents, insulating the walls, creating a vapor barrier on the floor if you have a dirt floor, and conditioning the air in the crawl space is now the standard for leadership in energy and environmental design homes. Those are LEED homes, LEED, and that's a worldwide green building certification.
Interesting.
Many towns still require vents for crawl spaces. But I spoke to Chernland. It's TJERNLUND. They make Radon and Crawlspace Fans.
Right.
They said the new International Residential Code now allows for unvented crawl spaces as long as the exposed earth is covered with a Class 1 vapor retarder. The seams overlap by 6 inches and they're sealed, and the edges extend up the walls a minimum of 6 inches, and they're sealed. You need
Didn't we do a podcast about this too?
Yeah, I forget what we called that one. Yeah.
It must have been memorable.
Yeah. I'll have to look it up. Email us and we'll let you know. For the new building code, if you want it to be unvented, they say you need to have either conditioned air going into the crawl space, dehumidification, or a continuously operated mechanical exhaust fan. And Chernland has Crawlspace fans with permanently lubricated motors. They're designed to run continuously. It's going to reduce moisture and improve the air quality.
Cool.
Chernland also has a radon ventilation fan, which will reduce radon levels in a crawl space, and that's going to reduce the radon level in the living space. It vents out of the sidewall and can be installed by a homeowner, so very unique. We put one of their basement radon fans in your cousin's home.
I know, I was there.
It did an amazing job of bringing down the radon levels.
Yeah. That was a good video.
Yeah, and especially because he has a bunch of kids, and it was pretty shocking how high the levels were.
Right.
And rather than having to go up through his attic like a lot of the systems, this vents right out the sidewall also.
Although it was scary cutting, what was a 6-inch hole?
6-inch hole through the side of his house. Yeah, that was pretty exciting. I think these continuously running exhaust fans for a crawl space make a lot of sense.
Right.
And we spoke to Easy Breathe about their system and the benefits.
You're not going to spell it?
Easy Breathe is just the letters E and Z, capital BREATHE.
Thank you.
Erica, how you doing?
I'm well, JC. How are you today?
Real good. Cindy and I were hoping we could get some information on your Easy Breathe crawl space ventilation system, and then if you have any tips for homeowners to improve the air quality in their home.
Sure, I'd love to help. I'm glad you asked, because indoor air quality is directly linked to the contaminant sources that are inherent in our homes, as well as the behavior of the occupants, the way we live in our homes. These can contribute to poor indoor air quality. So we like to focus on one of the largest contributors to poor indoor air quality, or one of the largest pollutant sources, is a home's foundation, which means it's what your home is built on, whether that be a crawl space or a basement, these spaces are one of the largest contributors to poor indoor air quality. And let me explain why. We dig a hole in the earth, and then we pour some concrete in there, and then we build a house on top and seal it all up. So these spaces are oftentimes considered separate from the house, but the more we've studied this in the last 2 decades, we're understanding that there's something called the building envelope, which is the entire perimeter of the building. And everything inside of this is an interconnected system when it comes to air quality. The air is shared throughout the home. So we have to consider these underground spaces, crawl spaces and basements, as part of the building envelope, and they need to be treated as such. So when we put this hole in the ground and we fill it with either block or poured concrete or brick or whatever the walls are made of, those walls are porous. And then we have soil on the other side. So either in the form of liquid water or water vapor, these are contaminant sources that create breeding grounds for molds, mildew. They reactivate dormant bacterias. And then this humid, stinky environment, it's very, very stagnant in the absence of any sort of ventilation or circulation or air communication. The only place that air has to go is up. So what ends up happening, and we hear it all the time, JC, right? People can smell their basement from the top of the steps, or they smell their crawl space through that trap door in the corner closet, because that air is actively being introduced into the living environment through the natural stack effect or chimney effect, right? Heat rises, and as heat rises, it draws that basement or crawl space air directly into the living environment. So the latest statistics tell us that 60% of the air that we breathe in our homes was once air in the crawl space or the basement.
Amazing. Huh?
So that air doesn't stay down there. So that's what we're here to do, is to help treat those spaces. So not only do they become healthier, but the whole home, in essence, has a better indoor air quality.
And what does your system do?
The Easy Breathe Crawl Space Conditioner System, we've had years in ventilating basements, and we tried to treat crawl spaces the same way, but we quickly learned that crawl spaces demanded a very specific system because they behave a little bit different than basements. Crawl spaces are a little bit leakier than the standard basement. So one of the things that we've done with our crawl space conditioner is we still ventilate it and we evacuate the air out of the crawl space. But what we've had to do is create a second component to our Easy Breathe Crawl Space Conditioner System. That's a powered intake that gets mounted in the floor of the living space. So it's actually mounted to the subfloor from within the crawl space. And it's a booster fan that actively introduces the air from the house down into the crawl space. So we can control where the replacement air is coming from. Once we evacuate the space, that crawl space, we push all that bad air to the outside. We want to make sure that the air that's being introduced into the crawl space is from a conditioned, clean source. We don't just want to be drawing it directly from the outside. So we're improving on the air quality, not just in the crawl space, but we're creating an exchange in the home as well. So we're able to treat the crawl space and provide an escape for the indoor pollutants from the living environment by having this 2-part system. One part is evacuating the air out of the crawl space, and on the opposite side of the crawl space, we're introducing that cleaner, drier air from upstairs. So we're assisting in the ventilation and the evacuation of pollutants in this 2-part system.
And can you draw the air from, let's say you have ductwork in the crawl, can you put a vent in, let's say, the cold air return?
We would prefer it be in the supply. So the air, we don't inadvertently suck air from the crawl space. Like when you turn the HVAC on, we don't want the air being sucked in from the crawl space and redistributed through the house.
Sure.
Right? We want to make sure that there's a vent, and that's very common, I'll tell you. In lieu of our powered floor intake, some folks will actually put a louvered powered vent in their supply that runs underneath the house in the crawl space. Yeah, that's a popular modification.
Okay. And then how big does the vent have to be if we're going through the subfloor?
The one that we supply with our system is 4 by 10 inches. It looks just like a typical floor register would. But there are these little fans in there that push air down through a louvered vent that introduces it into the crawl space. So, we've sort of engineered that to be very safe. It satisfies any sort of fire codes. So we're not inadvertently bringing crawl space air back up into the living environment. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that airstream only travels one way, and that's down into the crawl space.
And this is a continuous fan or a continuous system?
Yes, it's customizable, but our recommendation is that it run all the time when it's installed in a crawl space, because crawl space air is never good. Right. We don't want that air, stagnating. So, right. Yeah, we have a wide variety of settings based on square footage and how quickly you want the air to move. But yeah, this is a continuous mechanical ventilation system that provides complete whole home air exchanges. And the best part is the average American home we put this in sees an 85% reduction in airborne particles after Easy Breathe's been running for 30 days. So you have a much improved indoor air quality by allowing the Easy Breathe to exhaust, all those contaminants that get stuck inside.
With your system, does it matter the type of crawl space you have, whether you have a dirt floor, if it's encapsulated, or a concrete floor?
That's a great question, JC, and it's great for the listeners to hear that any crawl space with a dirt floor needs attention. That is not a healthy situation, whether you're looking to ventilate the space, encapsulate the space. The first order of business is to make sure that we cover that dirt with a vapor barrier, which is a fancy word for just some plastic. And any sort of venting in the crawl space itself, that was the old school strategy, was to try to create a cross ventilation with these vents. Sometimes the vents open and close based on dew point and humidity, but the reality is those vents don't work. When you rely on Mother Nature to create ventilation, you're never going to gain on it because Mother Nature, the dew point and the humidity levels, we can't control that. So those systems are kind of going by the wayside, and a closed system where you're including mechanical ventilation or complete encapsulation with dehumidification, those are really the best options for people with crawl spaces. So what we say, the bare minimum that you need to make sure an Easy Breathe is a good fit for your crawl space is a minimum of a 6 mil polymer plastic, which is called a vapor barrier, and that needs to be covering any sort of dirt. And we require that it go up the wall at least 6 inches so we can seal that against the wall of the crawl space with some special crawl space tape. And then if there's any seams in that vapor barrier, that they also overlap 6 inches. So it's 6 ml polymer plastic vapor barrier, overlapping 6 inches at the seam and up the wall 6 inches and taped. Any open vents are sealed and closed. And now we're able to control that environment. And that's what we want to do. We want to evacuate all the bad air, replenish it with better air from upstairs that will, in essence, condition that lower level. So then you're not dealing with having to necessarily insulate the floor. That space down there won't be necessarily hotter or colder. You're going to temperature balance out and condition that area. And most importantly, create a path of escape for all the contaminants that are generated in the house.
If you have an existing crawl space that's encapsulated with a dehumidifier, do you still leave the dehumidifier running, or do you eliminate that?
The ultimate goal is to eliminate that based on using a drier air quality. So once we condition that space, there won't be a need for the dehumidifier as long as the air quality being pumped into that crawl space is of a drier, cleaner quality. Like if we were just taking outdoor air and, with those old vent systems, letting outdoor air in and then moving outdoor air out, so you're exchanging humid air for humid air, that you would still need a dehumidifier. But because we're using that conditioned air from the upstairs, in essence, that space will dry out. You have no need for a dehumidifier.
Interesting. With your crawl space ventilation system, what other benefits are you gaining beside improving the air quality in the crawl itself?
That's a great question. Most people contact us because they've got an odor in their crawl space or they recognize their crawl space needs some attention. But the real benefit actually comes to the living environment and the home itself. People, obviously, the problems in the crawl space get eliminated. There's no more odors. There's no more lingering heavy, damp air, any sort of bacterias and allergens. Those all dissipate because we don't allow them to build up. We actually create an environment that's inhospitable for any of those things to thrive. But the real benefit comes when they call us and tell us that the air in their upper level, where they live and they breathe, feels so much better. We hear that folks don't need their allergy medication as often, or they don't need to use their inhaler, or they no longer sneeze at night, or their husband stops snoring. I mean, the list goes on to the health benefits that come from the living environment. Even though we're treating the crawl space, we're actually creating whole home air exchanges. And our scientific testing supports this. You know, when you look at fungal counts before and after Easy Breathe install, we measure that throughout the entire structure, not just in the crawl space or the basement, but also in the living environment. And all of those contaminants that we measure, whether it be fungal counts, airborne particles, gases, all of those see a significant reduction, you know, minimum of a 30 to 45% reduction and all the way up to an 85% reduction in air particles. Because think about it, JC, we're not allowing the air to be stagnant anywhere. And it's not as if the homeowners necessarily feel this, you know, breeze blowing through their house. It's very gentle. It happens in the background. People don't even notice the air moving, but they do notice that the air feels better and they feel better. And it just protects you from that nasty air coming up inside the structure. So it's a big win for not just the health and safety of the occupants, but also to protect the home from any sort of, dry rot, rusting, foundation structural problems.
Right. With your system, is there any concern with negative backflow for a furnace or a water heater that's in the crawl space?
That is something that we do take into consideration. We make sure that we install the ventilation exhaust appliance a minimum of 10 feet from any combustible device. So anything that requires a pilot light or anything that's drawing on its own air source, we make sure to source our Easy Breathe far enough away as to not conflict with that process. And again, it's a very gentle draw. I think, we're looking at a continuous mechanical whole home ventilation system versus maybe like a spot fan, like an exhaust fan in a bathroom. Those fans are pretty powerful. They're made to evacuate a relatively small space in a very quick amount of time. So our unit, you barely even hear the Easy Breathe. It runs at least a half to a quarter of the CFM of a spot ventilation system. We're a whole home ventilation system, so we operate at a much lower CFM, which basically describes the strength of the airflow. But because it's continuous, it does make a dramatic difference.
Erica, if we wanted to learn more about your system, where would we go?
Oh, you can visit our website, and that's easybreathe.com. That's letter E, letter Z, BREATHE.com. And if you have, direct questions you want to ask somebody right away, you can reach us at 1-866-822-7328.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, JC. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
That was a great interview.
Yeah, I really like a system like this where a homeowner can install it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else to add?
I would say along with sealing off your crawl space and adding ventilation or dehumidification, make sure that your gutter downspouts are extended away from the foundation wall 6 to 10 feet. Grade the soil away from your home. You should also talk to a local inspector. If you're in an area that floods,
right,
you're going to have different concerns. And one thing I didn't mention is never vent a dryer duct into your crawl space. You're going to add a lot of moisture, and that lint is highly flammable.
Right, yeah. Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Podacy, or your favorite podcast app.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our ebooks, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, books 1 through 12 on Amazon. Cindy is finishing up book 13 as we speak.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Fix It Home Improvement, and you can follow Cindy on Twitter at FixItCohost.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.